I was halfway through the frozen foods aisle when I felt a light tap on my shoulder. I turned, expecting someone to ask where to find the oat milk, or something like that. Instead, a woman I had never seen before smiled politely and said, "Your daughter is beautiful." At first, I thought she was talking to someone else. I glanced behind me, then back at her, confused. "I don't have a daughter," I said. The woman's smile faded, her eyebrows pinched together, and she looked over my shoulder again. Her voice dropped a little. "She has been following you since the park." I slowly turned around, and that is when I saw her, a little girl in a faded unicorn sweatshirt, reaching for my hand. "Can we go home now, Mommy?" Have you ever felt like a stranger was more observant of your life than your own family? Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from, and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. The manager of the Green Hearth approached us with that tight-lipped, curated concern that high-end grocery stores use when they think a customer is making a scene. Around us, the pre-holiday rush of shoppers slowed to a halt. I could feel their eyes, judging, squinting, and already labeling me as a negligent mother who had forgotten her child among the organic kale. I did not panic. I am a 32-year-old freelance architect. My entire career is built on analyzing structural integrity and logic. Panic is just a structural failure of the mind. I did not beg the manager to believe me. I did not offer a flustered explanation. I looked him dead in the eye and spoke in the same clinical tone I use for building contractors. I told him my name was Madison and that I had arrived in the parking lot exactly 10 minutes ago, alone. I demanded he pull the security footage from the entrance immediately. I was shifting from a person in a store to a woman conducting a hostile audit. I was not the one who had made a mistake. The store's security was. While we waited for a security guard named Mitch to radio in, I looked down. The little girl, Maya, was still holding my hand. Her grip was not the desperate, sweaty clutch of a lost child. It was anchored. It was a grip that felt like it had been practiced for years. I knelt down, intending to gently pry her fingers loose, but I stopped when I saw her eyes. They were not just brown, they were amber, a deep, crystalline gold that I had not seen in 9 years. They were Cassie's eyes. In that moment, I felt it. A jolt that bypassed my rational brain and hit the core of my DNA. My mind was screaming that this child was a stranger, but my body was recognizing a frequency it had missed for a decade. This was the biological mirror, that eerie, inescapable reflection where your own blood calls out to you before you even know its name. I looked at the way her thumb curled over my knuckles. It was a perfect, inherited fit. Logic told me I was alone in that store, but my marrow told me I was finally holding a piece of home. Mitch from security led us down a narrow hallway that smelled like industrial floor wax and clinical silence. Maya did not flinch. She just kept her hand locked in mine, her presence a heavy, golden weight. As we waited for the manager to scrub through the digital archives, my mind automatically started scrolling through the ledger of my own life. I am an architect. I track every square inch, every billable hour, and every structural weakness. For the past 10 weeks, I had not been building skylines. I had been building a buffer for a mother who never said thank you. My mother, Jennifer's knee reconstruction, had cost $15,000 in out-of-pocket expenses. I had paid it. The property taxes on her pristine colonial home were $3,500. I had paid those, too. I was not doing it out of some sentimental warmth. I was doing it because, in the cold, transactional economy of our family, I was the only one with a solvent emotional bank account. My compassion had not been a gift. It had been a high-interest loan that Jennifer had been defaulting on for years. This was the martyrdom of the reliable sibling. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who answered the 11:51 p.m. texts about grocery lists and prescription refills. While my sister Cassie had walked away 9 years ago, leaving a crater of unanswered questions and bitter silence, I had stepped into the breach. I had become the silent investor in Jennifer's version of a perfect life. I had traded my own architectural firm's growth for the role of an unpaid concierge, a fixer who was only noticed when the machine stopped running. I remembered the day Cassie left. She was the wild one, the one who took the light and the air out of the room. When she vanished, my mother did not grieve. She just reallocated the expectations. She overdrafted on my loyalty until I was spiritually bankrupt. I became a placeholder for a ghost. I spent years making sure the bills were paid and the lawn was mowed, hoping that if I was reliable enough, the disappointment tag Jennifer had attached to our bloodline would finally be removed. Every time I pulled into Jennifer's driveway, the engine of my car felt like it was sighing in exhaustion. I had been the hands and feet for her recovery. But I had also been the emotional floorboards, holding everything up while people walked all over me without noticing the wood was beginning to rot. I thought about the 3 architecture projects I had put on hold, to drive her to physical therapy 3 times a week. That was $10,000 in lost revenue. I had written it off as the cost of being the good child. But looking at Maya now, the math was not adding up. I had been a fixer for Cassie's mistakes and Jennifer's demands, but who was fixing things for this little girl? My father left when I was 8, and Cassie left when she was 23. For 9 years, I had been the only one left to sign the contracts of family duty. I realized then that my life was an empty blueprint. I had spent so much time reinforcing the foundations of other people's lives that I had forgotten to build walls for my own. This was not family. It was a hostile takeover of my time and resources. And as the security monitor flickered to life, showing the grainy footage of Maya following me through the produce section, I knew the audit was finally beginning. I was not going to be the martyr anymore. I was going to be the architect of a new reality. The drive to my mother's house was 20 minutes of heavy, expectant silence. Maya sat in the back seat, her small frame swallowed by the leather upholstery of my car, staring out the window at the passing suburban lawns. She looked like a ghost haunting her own future. I had been the hands and feet of this family for 10 weeks, carrying Jennifer through her recovery. But as I pulled into her driveway, I felt like I was delivering a bomb to a pristine bunker. Jennifer met us at the door. She was dressed in her usual curated elegance, a soft cashmere sweater and pearls, looking every bit the retired teacher whose life was a series of graded lessons. But the moment her eyes landed on Maya, the perfect mother mask did not just slip. It shattered. There was no grandmotherly warmth, no tears of recognition. There was only a sharp, jagged terror. Shame. "What is this, Madison?" she hissed, not even opening the screen door fully. She looked at Maya like she was a stain on a white rug. I did not flinch. I told her the truth, that the DNA matched, that this was Cassie's daughter, and that she had found me in a grocery store. I expected the fixer in her to take over, but instead, she turned into the eraser. "Cassie never had a child," Jennifer stated, her voice dropping into that terrifyingly calm tone she used when she was rewriting reality. She was wild, she was troubled, but she was not a mother. "This is a scam. This girl is a plant. Some drifter from Cassie's old life is trying to get into my bank account. She was gaslighting me in my own shoes, standing on the porch I had paid the taxes for 3 weeks ago. The cruelty was clinical. She told me to take Maya to the local fire station and drop her off before the neighbors see. She called her a mistake that Cassie had left behind to tarnish our name. My mother did not just lose a daughter 9 years ago. She had spent a decade scrubbing Cassie's existence from our suburban history, and Maya was a smudge she could not wipe away. I looked at the hallway behind her. It smelled like expensive candles and the iron-scented silence of a graveyard. This house was a museum of the daughter Jennifer wanted, and Maya did not fit the exhibit. "She is your blood, Mom," I said, my voice as cold as a contract. Jennifer did not look at Maya once. She just looked at me and said, "Blood is just a liquid, Madison. Reputation is a legacy. Get that thing out of my house." I did not argue. I did not beg for her to see the amber in Maya's eyes. I realized then that my mother was a thief of memories. She had drafted a version of our family that did not include the wild child or the secret granddaughter, and I had been the one footing the bill for the fiction. As I turned back toward the car, the suburban sunlight felt blinding and false. I was not just Maya's aunt anymore. I was her only defense against the suburban eraser. The martyr's ledger was closed. The hostile audit of my mother's life was officially underway. I did not drive home to my studio to grieve. I went back to my office to begin a structural audit of my sister's disappearance. For 9 years, I had accepted my mother's narrative that Cassie had simply chosen the chaos over us. I was the reliable one who believed the lies of the gatekeeper. But looking at Maya, I realized my sister had not vanished. She had been erased by a carefully maintained information blackout. I hired a private investigator named Robert. I did not want a shoulder to cry on. I wanted a forensic accounting of Cassie's lost decade. Within 48 hours, Robert traced her life to a tiny, meticulously clean basement apartment in Eugene. She had not been partying. She had been working 2 retail jobs to keep Maya in that faded unicorn sweatshirt. She had been fighting a quiet, exhausted battle for survival, while I was busy paying for Jennifer's high-end recovery. The most devastating report came on Wednesday. Cassie had not died years ago in some drug-fueled haze. She had passed away exactly 1 week ago from a sudden illness. While I was standing in the grocery store, picking out apples for a mother who never said thank you, my sister was being buried in a potter's field 200 miles away. But secrets have a terrifying resilience. They do not just stay buried, they wait for the person with the right key to find them. Robert discovered that Cassie had been writing to our childhood home for years. I knew my mother's routines. I knew exactly where she kept the things she did not want the world to see. I waited until Jennifer was at her physical therapy session, the one I was still paying for, and I walked into her house with my own key. I did not go to the kitchen. I went to the master bedroom, to the heavy mahogany safe in the back of her closet. I had memorized the code when I was 16, watching her hide my father's child support checks. Inside, tucked behind her jewelry boxes, was a thick manila envelope. It was not full of cash. It was full of 62 letters. Every single one was addressed to me, in Cassie's frantic, beautiful handwriting. Jennifer had not just burned letters, she had warehoused them like evidence in a crime. I opened the most recent one, dated 3 months ago. Cassie was not begging for money. She was begging for a sister. She wrote that she was sick and that Maya needed to know Aunt Madison. She told me she was sorry for the day I kicked her out, and that she did not want her daughter to grow up in the shadow of our mother's shame. Jennifer had intercepted every single cry for help. She had blocked every bridge Cassie tried to build, because a secret granddaughter did not fit the blueprint of her perfect suburban life. My mother had treated my sister's life like a structural error that needed to be paved over. This was the resilience of secrets. They are a form of toxic control, a way to own a narrative by starving everyone else of the truth. As I stood in that silent room, holding a decade of my sister's voice, I realized I was not the good child anymore. I was a witness to a 9-year history of theft. Maya was sitting on the floor of my architecture studio, lining up colored pencils with a precision that mirrored my own blueprints. She did not ask for a tablet or a television. She just worked in a silence that was too heavy for a 9-year-old child. Around her neck, she wore the locket, the cheap, silver-plated heart I had bought for Cassie with my first paycheck as an intern. I finally sat Maya down and clicked it open. Inside, tucked behind the address of my current office, was a tiny, folded slip of paper. It was not a note or a lock of hair. It was a receipt for a direct deposit into a bank account I did not recognize. I handed that slip of paper to Robert, my private investigator. I did not want emotional theories. I wanted a digital autopsy of my family's financial secrets. What he found was not just a secret. It was a documented crime scene. It turned out my sister had qualified for a disability allowance shortly after Maya was born, $1,200 every single month. The bank records Robert recovered showed that the checks had been arriving at our childhood home like clockwork. And every month, for 9 years, they were cashed using a signature that was a perfect, clinical forgery of Cassie's handwriting. My mother had not just intercepted letters to protect her reputation. She had been harvesting a dead girl's lifeline to fund her own comfort. I sat at my desk and pulled up my firm's accounting software. I did not see a grieving grandmother. I saw a balance sheet that had been intentionally manipulated. $1,200 multiplied by 12 months, multiplied by 9 years. The total sat on my screen in cold, bold, black ink, $129,600. The realization hit with the force of a structural collapse. While I was working 80-hour weeks and skipping my own meals to pay for Jennifer's high-end medical insurance and her luxury recovery suites, she was sitting on a mountain of stolen cash. She had used the money meant for an orphan child to maintain the facade of her pristine suburban lifestyle, while forcing me to foot the bill for her surgeries. Every organic apple I brought her, every hour I spent driving her to physical therapy, was an overdraft on a compassion she had been embezzling for a decade. Jennifer had not just erased Cassie from our history. She had monetized her. She had turned my sister's desperate struggle into a personal revenue stream. I looked at the numbers on my screen again. The anger was not loud or explosive this time. It was clinical. I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon even a flicker of regret for the legal war I was about to unleash. But there was only clarity. This was not a family feud. This was a foreclosure on a decade of lies. I picked up the phone and called Grace, my family law attorney. It was time to stop being the fixer and start being the debt collector. The glass doors of my architecture studio rattled as Jennifer pushed her way inside. She did not look like the suburban eraser anymore. Her cashmere sweater was wrinkled, her pearls were missing, and her eyes were blotchy from what I assumed were hours of performative weeping. She looked disheveled, a strategic aesthetic designed to trigger my fixer instincts one last time. She walked toward my desk, her hands trembling as she reached out to grab my arm. "Madison, please," she sobbed, her voice high and desperate. "You have to call off this lawyer. You have to drop these charges. They are talking about fraud, Madison. They are talking about prison. Do you have any idea what that would do to our family name?" She was using the family card, the same one she had been overdrawing on for 32 years. She was banking on my history of reliability to cover the debt of her crimes. I did not move to comfort her. I did not offer a chair or a glass of water. I stood in the center of my studio, the space I had built with my own sweat and logic, and looked at her with the clinical detachment of a building inspector surveying a total loss. "Family name?" I asked, my voice flat and final. "You spent 9 years harvesting my sister's lifeline and burning her letters. There is no family name left. There is only an audit." Jennifer's face shifted from grief to a sharp, jagged panic. She tried to pivot, falling back on the oldest manipulation in her arsenal. "Blood is thicker than water, Madison. I made mistakes, yes, but I am your mother. I raised you. I protected you. You cannot do this to your own blood." It was the blood song, the same tune she had hummed while she was forging signatures and cashing disability checks meant for a child. I reached into the manila envelope I had recovered from her safe and pulled out the 62 letters Cassie had written to me. I dropped the heavy stack onto the glass table between us. The sound was like a gavel hitting a block. "Blood did not stop you from stealing $129,600 from an orphaned child." "Mom," I said, leaning forward until I could see the reflection of her own shame in her eyes. "Blood did not stop you from letting your granddaughter wander into a grocery store because you were too busy erasing her mother's existence." I watched the realization hit her. The mask of maternal authority finally dissolved, leaving only a thief who had run out of time. She opened her mouth to beg again, but I held up a hand. I was terminating the contract. I told her that I was done being the fixer for her life. I told her that the house, the taxes, and the surgeries were no longer my responsibility. "I am not your concierge anymore, Jennifer. And you are not a mother. You are just a liability I am finally removing from my books." I pointed toward the door. The threshold of ash was behind her, and for the first time in my life, I was not going to be the one to sweep it up. The legal system does not care about blood being thicker than water. It cares about signatures, bank logs, and the cold reality of $129,600. Jennifer did not get to rewrite this ending. The suburban facade she spent 32 years building was dismantled in a courtroom that smelled of old paper and inevitable consequences. She was forced to sell the colonial house to pay back the restitution, moving into a small, anonymous apartment that I will never visit. For the first time in my life, I stopped making her morning coffee and stopped footing the bill for her version of a perfect life. 3 months later, I sat in a different kind of office. It wasn't for the final adoption yet that would take another year of bureaucracy, but for the finalization of Maya's permanent legal guardianship. When the judge finally signed the decree, granting me full authority over her future, the disappointment tag my mother had attached to our bloodline was officially incinerated. When we walked out into the sunlight, Maya did not just hold my hand. She swung it, looking up at me with those golden amber eyes that were finally free of the shadows. I have a new studio now, a space filled with light, drafting tables, and a small corner where a 9-year-old girl keeps her colored pencils in a perfect, logical line. Yesterday, I caught her looking at the fridge, which is now covered in her drawings of purple houses and 3 stick figures, me, her, and the cat. She started humming a soft, steady tune, the same one Cassie used to sing when we were kids. I realized then that I was not the family fixer anymore. I was not reinforcing a rotting foundation. I was the architect of a home that actually belonged to us. To those of you listening who have spent your lives feeling like the invisible one, the reliable child who was only noticed when you were carrying someone else's burden, this is for you. You are not a placeholder for a ghost, and your compassion is not a high-interest loan for people who refuse to love you. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop fixing a house that was never meant to hold you, and start building a new blueprint for yourself. You do not need an invitation to shine, and you certainly do not need permission to be your own home. Grief did not end when I found Maya. It just changed form from a hole into a responsibility. But it is a weight I choose to carry, because for the first time, the math of my life finally adds up to peace. Maya calls me mom now, and every time she says it, I remember that sometimes the people we are meant to love find us in the most unexpected aisles of our lives. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe. Remember, sometimes family is not the place you were born into. It is the person who looks like your future. See you in the next story.